Hello everyone and welcome back to Star Wars Loose Canon. My name is Chris Higgins. Happy to have you guys back to the podcast, Brothers Krynn, Dan and Joe, talking about the Kenobi Timeline Part 6. So guys, let's get rolling. I know we've been making people wait between parts, but I think it's well worth it.
Thanks. It's good to be back. This is Part 6. Hopefully we'll make it to Part 25, like Indiana Jones, I think it is. Actually, if we ever do, we'll have to actually make sure to play the Indy song. Because, it'd be appropriate.
I think so, too.
John Williams. God bless that man. Anyways.
Yeah, what would Star Wars be without him?
Yeah, I know, right? Nowhere good, that's for sure. They'd have had to settle for Hans Zimmer. I'm joking. I like Zimmer. I just have to crack these jokes. But anyways, last time we left off, it was on the cusp of episode 4, I believe. Like, we had the thing with episode 4, as our oldest brother imagined it, because, okay, a lot of what's going to happen is kind of going to fit with his vision of things. So this is where I'm more like a messenger in a way rather than an active participant, because a lot of the ideas that went into the OT era, a lot of things when it relates to Luke, Han, and the other main characters, I'm more a messenger. It was our brother who kind of took him, Chris, our eldest brother, who basically just pioneered and planned most of the stuff, and Dan and I would kind of help him fill out the gaps. So this is very much his project now. That being said, at least, especially in regards to the movies, because he had those things memorized down to every line, every second. I think he still does. Now, with episode 4, everything will go exactly like the actual movie. The only addition is, as we had noted last time, Lorian Kenobi, the younger son of Tahlon Kenobi and Talanis Kenobi. And Lorian is a much more youthful character. He's to be about 13 or 14 by the time of episode 4. So he's about 5 years and a half younger than Luke. So he's very much an annoying kid brother, to an extent, to Luke and Han. But he's ultimately a much more... He's not... How we went with it with our oldest brother is that Lorian is not the impulsive hothead his older brother is, because his older brother's becoming more and more like Mace Windu. But this younger sibling is more like Obi-Wan in personality. He's very much the level-headed one who will often be the one to say, I have a bad feeling about this. And he's the negative Nancy. And the one's just not liking people reacting on emotion. He doesn't like emotions. So that, ironically, I think he was supposed to be given the line, have we found another pathetic life form? He's really channeling the Obi-Wan from episode 1. So, in that regard, he's a bit like a spiritual reincarnation of Obi, in a way. But he's a little more... He claims he's not as reckless, but he's probably a little more reckless than Obi-Wan, though he doesn't consciously realize it. So this character is being inserted in there. But the interesting thing is he's not going to be a leader type character. That role will be reserved for Luke, and even Leia and Han to an extent. Lorian's always going to kind of be trailing along, trying to tell them, I think this is, or that is a bad idea. And they're going to do it. So he serves a different kind of character role. And he's completely different from, say, Jubilee or any of the Robins.
And many child appeal characters from your typical TV shows.
Yeah, he's supposed to be the one who acts as a restraining factor. So in episode 4, he's basically trailing along. with Ben and Luke. Now, he would probably be at the hovel when Luke wakes up, and visits. And the thing is, Lorian would probably be the one to serve him tea or something. And the thing is, the bond between him and Ben is supposed to be stiff. Neither of them are very emotional men. So they're very emotionally stiff with each other. And Lorian is very conscious of what's logical. And like I said, he's not, well, he wants an attachment with his grandfather, but his grandfather's, there's a whole trauma from episode 3. So, he's someone who will not be making comments about the whole Anakin Vader thing, because he's basically ordered off to go prepare the speeder and, refuel it and run the errands and do the chores. Because what else is a Padawan for? Because and the thing is, Lorian will end up basically accompanying them with the Jawas and whatnot, but on a separate motorbike, speeder bike, I should say. Because the notion our oldest brother had was that Qui-Gon did have something of a grease monkey in him, so there would be a speeder bike, just in case there's a need for an escape. And that would reflect Qui-Gon's paranoia as a character. So Lorian's just accompanying on the speeder bike, which he would then take to go on ahead to Mos Eisley, due to the fact that, he's the Padawan. He has to get the dirty jobs. And this is where he just acts as a scout. Now, because he has good instincts and knows to keep his head down, he's not really going to get spotted by the stormtroopers. He deliberately avoids them. And I was thinking he would do one thing which his older brother would actually kind of dislike, and that's sell the speeder bike, just as Luke sells the land speeder, because there's no need for it. And so when Ben walks into the pub, Lorian ends up slipping in to, report to his grandfather and basically give over the cash that he has collected. The thing is, he's going to be a character who eyes up Han mistrustfully. And the most he'll say is, I don't trust him. And that's where Han will basically fire off a comment about him. Listen, kid. Han would probably say something to the effect of, then you're smart. Because in this galaxy, you don't trust anyone. Because Han does have that side to him. But he'd say it with a roguish grin. But the thing is, with Lorian, he'll probably comment, I'm usually right. Because, his view is, I don't trust rogues. But this is something which Lorian would later be proven wrong on, of course. Because he's proven wrong a lot. So, everything will proceed like it did before. Lorian, though, is already on the Millennium Falcon. Because by the time Han is racing away from those stormtroopers, because he'd have loaded on alongside Ben and Luke. That's just how it is, because we're not trying to attract attention to the character. We have to downplay him and play up Luke and Han, because this is their story. And, of course, everything proceeds. They take off, they go, and whatnot. The only change would be that there'd be a brief duel between Lorian and Luke, just for training purposes, which Luke would kind of feel bad about and insecure about, because, this little kid brother of his is better in saber training than him. But this is where some of Lorian's kindlier side would shine, in that where Obi-Wan at 13 might have felt a little insecure and kind of, pushed back. Even Tahlon would. Lorian does not. He does try to say, well, you did a good enough job. You did a good job for a neophyte. And the problem is, this is true. But, Luke would kind of be like, a neophyte? Man. But that's the thing. Like, Luke is gifted. He just It's like, well, you're pretty good for a rookie from someone like 5 years younger who's your younger brother. That's a little embarrassing for a man. So, yeah. Now, the only thing is when Han says, like, there's nothing more useful than a blaster at your side and whatnot, most Lorian would do is just bristle and say, and just summon over to him Han's blaster and say, how's that? And, Han would make a witty remark. I can't think of one right now. But the thing about Han, as everyone knows in episode 4, is he's the wittiest guy around. So he's going to win this one. When it comes to boarding the Death Star, same thing happens. They load up into the security room. The difference is, Ben will be focused on Luke, and Lorian would try to say, grandfather, you should at least let me accompany you. And Ben would tell him, no, you stay with Luke, you safeguard him. And, he is not to fall, no matter the cost. And, your destiny lies with him. And races out. Now, what our oldest brother was thinking was that Lorian would feel a bit hurt by this. Because he was hoping for a warmer... if he was to be turned down, he wanted it to be warmer. And that his grandfather acknowledged him as grandson. But he treats him more like a Padawan than than his, blood. On the other hand, the thing is, Lorian, ever the obedient child, would kind of side with Han when, it's time for... when Luke says, we got to go rescue her and whatnot. And you have... Lorian would see it as, well, we can't. We have our orders. And, Luke would insist because... And Luke would get his own way because he has to. But the thing is, Lorian would probably say something snarky and a little mean-spirited to Han. It's like, for once the criminal speaks sense, listen to him, Luke. But Luke, will prevail. And Han, charmed by Luke's innocence and goodness, goes along. While with Luke basically having to reinforce to Lorian, they're going to kill her. You want her blood on you? No, but I have my orders to guard you. Good. Then you can guard me while I go rescue her. And Lorian, unable to really put up an argument, is just going to have to go along with it. And they, of course, leave the droids. Because who needs them? I'm joking. So, everything...
Well, that's what Han would say.
Maybe I'm channeling my inner Han Solo. But there is one difference that would set off the Empire a little. In the prison sector, there would be a lightsaber spotted. And this would be a major deal. Because Lorian would not resort to... Now, he would have been using the same Force trick that Ben used to slip around. And using the same techniques. They're not, super advanced as far as techniques go. But the minute he whips out the lightsaber, the Empire's like, oh, there's a lightsaber. Get him. But the thing is, he's not going to resort to a blaster like other Jedi. He will resort to a lightsaber. And he'll follow the rest of their leads. And, of course, everything ends up in the hangar and everything happens exactly as it originally did. Lorian himself will probably end up racing after Han and Chewie because he'll be, he'll be basically just like, I can't believe those two. I got to go guard them. Because he has no faith in Han and no trust for him. To his mind, Han racing off on his own in the middle of the Death Star, for all he knows, Han's going to later sell them out. But this is where Lorian is showing he doesn't have good judgment with Han. He just fundamentally believes in the worst in Han. And this is because Lorian at his core is like Obi. He's a rule follower, at least in episode 1. So it's like, he's going to be, he's got his head up his ass, but he's 13. Like, he's a kid. That said, he's going to be a character who does have his lightsaber out in the hangar. He is helping out, but the thing is, he will freeze up because that's the whole idea our oldest brother had. He freezes up at the sight of Vader because he's overwhelmed by the darkness and the power. So Ben still dies. Lorian achieves nothing, except he was helpless in the face of evil. And this would kind of shape and mark Lorian for the rest of his life, who would, this is kind of going to haunt him because he was helpless when, he should have been doing something. He's a Jedi, and he didn't do anything. But a 13-year-old Padawan freezing up like that is very realistic. And this happens several times throughout the Star Wars universe. And, then there's the whole Battle of Yavin. Lorian's just in the background. He's just going to stay on Yavin because what can he do? He can't do anything. Although the idea was that I think Luke would try to reason with Han to take Lorian with him. Lorian would refuse. But Han would feel bad because Han has a core of goodness in him. So, yeah, Episode 4 happens exactly like canon. After Episode 4, now bear in mind, there's a massive battle, according to the Star Wars Battlefront 2 and some of the comics. And what happens is you have the Empire that, the 501st remnants and link up with another unit and utterly curb stomp the rebellion. And the thing is, they were being held back by the idiocy of Tarkin. And now that they're unleashed, there's nothing to stop them. And of course, Vader is elsewhere, and it takes him weeks to finally arrive on the scene. But by the time he arrives, the 501st have basically, blockaded the planet. Or I should say the moon, because it's a moon. But Luke ends up escaping, discovering Hoth, all that. That stuff happens. And as for Lorian, he just ends up helping on the planet's surface, fighting against the odd stormtrooper and whatnot. Much as there were some rebels would not want to deploy a child. He is a Jedi, and on the other hand, what choices do they really have? I'll defend the rebellion here. They don't really have many clean options. Everyone has to help. Qui-Gon, of course, will rush through, breaking through the blockade to get to Yavin, because he'll have heard of what's happened. So he temporarily puts aside his cover as a Dooku and rushes over in a starfighter. But this is where the more competent and older Kenobi comes in. And, of course, he's pretty peeved about what's happened and about his grandfather dying. Him and Han would exchange words, and Luke would kind of feel bad because he's thinking he kind of let Qui-Gon down. Qui-Gon himself would be disappointed in Luke, and part of him would be a little annoyed with him, but another part of him would be proud of Luke. But in turn, Qui-Gon then basically helps with the evacuation plan to get, as many rebels off to Hoth. But in all this, Viera, the daughter of a clone, would come along, and she would have participated in this secondary battle of Yavin, because the minute she heard the Death Star was destroyed, now she didn't previously know about the Death Star, because it was top secret info, she would not have been privy, but hearing of the death of billions of her uncles will have shocked and traumatized her. So she would vow vengeance and hatred against Luke. And she would charge forward, join with her uncles, and become the lead starfighter pilot for the Empire. Basically doing a freebie rather than taking a bounty hunting paycheck on this one. And the fact the Millennium Falcon was spotted in the area is just icing on the cake. So this is where she would basically end up dominating even Qui-Gon in a dogfight as a starfighter pilot. and would dominate even Han and Luke. And the reason is her Arc 170 is far more of a combat vessel than the Millennium Falcon. And we got to bear in mind, she has 501st military and space combat training. This is far above any training that the Rebellion had on hand, or that many even Imperial Academies had. So the thing is, with her, it'd be up to Qui-Gon to basically try to get rid of her, or otherwise distract her, when the time comes to escape from Yavin. So this is his job, and of course, Luke and Han escape, but we're thinking Qui-Gon ends up kind of outclassed, only for, of all people, to show up, Ferris Lynn, who would basically almost shoot her down. And Qui-Gon would escape, and Ferris would then turn around and duck the other way. After that, we enter the arc between episode 4 and 5. Now, Han ends up, I think, going to Ord Mantell, I believe, and has a run-in with... Nar Shaddaa, I think. Yeah, it's Nar Shaddaa. I'm pretty sure it is. Oh, well. He has a run-in on one of those city planets that's got a lot of crime with Boba Fett. And this kind of scares Han.
That was Jabba calling.
Yeah, Jabba wants his money. I don't have his money.
That's all right. Just hold him off.
Yeah.
He might send Greedo if he could find him.
But, hey, I shot first. But as for Han, all I know about that storyline is that he does end up limping back, and the Millennium Falcon's kind of damaged. Now, we were thinking that there would be a few other adventures. Now, this is where we're thinking, I believe, that part of the reason Bubba even managed to track Han would have been because, well, oh, right, I think Luke also had an adventure tied in around that time with Han. But we were going to also tie it in with the Baron Doe. Now, the Baron Doe in KOTOR are some monks and nuns who basically operate like monasteries and convents. You know, like they're a order of lightsiders who do not believe in violence. And they're keepers of knowledge, and they're generally, like I said, monastic monks, like the Gregorian monks or nuns. And this is where we're going to refer back to, I believe, the concept of a light side version of the Night Sisters, the Day Sisters. And we were thinking one adventure around this time would be where Luke would end up forming a kind of Force-sensitive connection, very briefly, basically sensing a Day Sister in danger, and, you know, he'd want to help. And the thing is, this convent would end up raided, and it was all on the Outer Rim. And, of course, Luke would help a lot of them escape, but one of them would stow aboard with Han, and she would basically form a friendship with Lorian because she'd be about the same age. I think her name was Nineveh.
I think so.
Yeah, Nineveh, after the goddess in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And her and Lorian basically kind of form a duo, but after some adventures, they would basically drop her off again with her family. Well, I say her family, but her order. And she'd basically carry on back to a convent, because she was part of a group of Day Sisters that functioned as Baron Doe nuns. And in turn, Lorian... now, Lorian would, because of this, get in trouble, and this would kind of tip Bubba off and whatnot. So it's kind of his fault. And this way, the whole thing with Luke, Lorian, and Han ties together with the Falcon as well. Lorian, of course, will feel bad, Now, on the adventure where they're trying to take this little girl, or young girl, to whom Lorian's kind of infatuated with, back to the convent, we were thinking there would be a run-in with Darth Vader at one point. Because the thing is, the escorting her to a new convent would take place after Han's run-in with Boba. So you have the run-in with Boba, they go back to Hoth, then they go back out there. And the Millennium Falcon's not fully operational right now. We were thinking, though, there's a trap set by Vader, because Vader loves his traps. But we got to bear in mind, in the comic book universe, Vader sets like 5-6 traps between episode 4 and 5. He's always trying to catch Luke. And even Leia. But in this case, one such trap would basically involve Vader luring them into a large smelting and manufacturing plant. So basically, trash is collected and dumped into a large molten pit. And no, you can't roast your marshmallows with this pit, sadly. Many characters have tried. But it's during this quest that Lorian would basically say, I really don't think we should be going near this planet. And the thing is, he'd be overruled because they need to stop because the Falcon's still having problems and Han wants to fix it. And Lorian would say, we really shouldn't land. And the Day Sister, Nineveh, would say, well, I can send some of my sisters on this planet. You have Lorian, I really don't think it's a good idea. I have a bad feeling about this. And in the end, it turns out to be a Vader trap, as said. And some of the Day Sisters will have been killed. Many of them were simply prisoners of Vader. And, of course, you have Vader, who would ultimately be trying to lure Luke and Leia into, well, alone, because, you know, he needs his apprentice and spare. But I say spare, but actually probably trying, I don't know. He always seems to lure Leia over. Don't know why. But Han is really the one he doesn't really want anything to do with. So basically the idea is he would he'd basically separate the team. And Lorian would end up following Han. Chewie, Luke, and Leia are going in a different direction. Day Sister Chick is waiting on the Millennium Falcon because they're not bringing her into a combat situation. They're not idiots. Okay. They can be idiotic sometimes, but they're not, like, total idiots. I'm joking here. Lorian, though, and Han end up near the pit, but here's the thing. Vader would outsmart them, and would also have basically, he would have Han knocked out with the Force, because why not? Why waste a lightsaber on him? And we really can't have any harm coming to Han. Lorian ends up pinned down and with a set of manacles set to his feet, and both feet drilled through, as Vader did not really want young Padawan running around, and until the shackles are removed and he's dropped into smelt pit. So, you know, he basically tells them, "Ta-ta, losers." Nah, this is Vader. He wouldn't say "ta-ta, losers."
Although you could probably certainly imagine it. Ta-ta.
It has to be like a dad pun.
What?
It'd have to be like a dad pun, like a dad joke.
Yeah.
He likes his dad jokes.
Yeah. Now that you are, you are, not pinned. Nah, he might say, like, while you wait here, pinned down by your destiny and failure, I have an apprentice to claim. and leaves in a swish of his cape.
I like it.
Okay. I got the pun for... Okay, good. And Lorian, despairing, will glance down at Smelt Pit, glance up, glance down, see Han slipping down as the wall is starting to, press itself towards the door like it does in Star Wars, and Han could potentially fall down into Pit. So Lorian would basically, reach out with a force, grab him, and hold him by the arm, but once those drills, are removed and Lorian drops, both him and Han would die. But this is where he braces himself, looks down. He still has his lightsaber because Vader didn't think him worth disarming. Because honestly, he's not a threat to Vader. And Lorian would make a fateful decision. At which point he will, just as the drills, which have basically smashed through bone and muscle and tissue through his feet, goes to release, he decides he's going to... But here's the thing. They're going to release, and the door is closing. So if he waits for the release, he's not going to make it. So he decides he'll go right before the release and get through the door. Because the most important thing is to save Han. So he will slice off his legs, jumping up, even as he jumps up with the Force, and land safely within the doorway, which closes within inches of, him and Han, because it has to. Han, of course, then wakes up and would notice the cauterized feet bleeding, and the boy basically... Well, they're semi-cauterized, because remember, there was blood in Episode 4, so from a lightsaber wound. So as said, Lorian could not count on his feet in time to get through the door. So he had to slice off his legs, like the lower part of his legs, just below the knee, and escape. Naturally, Han carries him back to Luke, who has been disarmed of his lightsaber, and this is where we were going to make a nod to Episode 2. Lorian and Han arrive. Lightsabers tossed to Luke, who now has 2 on hand. And of course, Vader would kind of just take stock of Lorian lost his legs. And would go, he hewed off his own legs. Impressive. In that Vader way, because he always does say, impressive, when he's impressed by someone.
Yeah.
But this is where they fend him off for a bit until they basically Luke pushes him back just enough, loses Lorian's lightsaber, which is cut down, and gets a sneaky idea alongside Leia, who uses a turbo laser to fire at Vader, which only pushes him back a little. They then close the door to another smelting chamber, and Vader's supposed to fall down the cliff and be melted. But he's Vader, so it doesn't freaking work. Because it can't. And they go to escape. Vader blasts his way with the Force back into the room, and the heroes basically ride off onto the Millennium Falcon and flee, and then drop off the little convent nun apprentice and return back to Hoth. And the thing is, Qui-Gon, when he'll find out, will be enraged that they once again put his brother in danger, and this creates a bit of a rift between him and Luke and him and Han. Luke feels, terrible, but Han will feel even worse. And this is where our oldest brother planned for there to be a very tender moment, because when Qui-Gon says it's all your fault and would just punch Han a few times, Han does not fight back and would just tell him, "I'm sorry." To which Qui-Gon storms off, gets back on his ship, and flies off for a bit before coming back and with medical supplies, because he went to blow off steam and find medical supplies for his brother. And, of course, Han would be waiting by Lorian's side in the med bay every hour, and Leia would tell him at some point, "Why don't you go get some sleep?" And you have Han, no, like, med bays are never very fun, and somebody's got to stick around till he wakes up. And Leia, moved by what she sees as a genuine flash of goodness in Han, would tell him, she would tell him that she doesn't think it was his fault, and you have Han, but it was. It was. I made the call. We land on that planet. He lost his legs. I kind of got to stick around till he wakes up. And this is where the idea was that this is also the beginning of when Leia really starts to fall in love with Han, because she sees there's something great in Han. And so Lorian losing his legs is used as character development and to kind of show the hero in Han that he's still impulsive, but now he's realizing there's consequences to his actions. So it's really about Han. And Lorian, who spent some time in a Bacta tank and then getting some extra supplies, would end up with prosthetic legs. And the thing is, Ferrus Olin would eventually stop by for a visit, refused to train Luke because that's not his responsibility, and Ferrus honestly didn't believe in Luke. I'm just referring back to the expanded universe. He never believed in Luke. So, or Leia for that matter. But he would be coming over to pick up Lorian, which Luke and Han would kind of feel bad. Han would be against it because he's kind of grown into a bit of a big brother role and would see it as no one's touching or dragging this kid away from here. But Ferrus would tell him he needs to continue his Jedi training. He needs to build a new lightsaber. And honestly, at this point, he's a nuisance to you guys. No, he's coming with me. I made a promise. He's my Padawan learner. I'm taking him in. You're going to have to fight me for him. And this is where Qui-Gon had been the one to report to Ferrus about this situation and had requested Ferrus to take Lorian in. And this is why Ferrus is there. So, I know I'm doing things backwards again, as I always do. But the thing is, though, Lorian would want to go with Ferrus because he knows he can refine his Jedi techniques with Olin far better than he could with Luke and the gang. Luke, though, feels very sad because this is someone who's been around with him for 2 years straight, constantly living with him. So he's seeing the kid grow from 13 to 15 years old, and he does feel very responsible for him. And so, as Ferrus flies off back to his asteroid with Lorian, you have Luke standing on a small snow hill, staring up into the sky. That with Han soon joining him, and that's where we'll end for today. I hope I wasn't too rushed or too weird an episode. I was trying not to remove the focus from Han and Luke.
Sorry, when I said 7, I actually meant 7 Central. So I do. If you want, we could do more today. But
okay, I misunderstood.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot we're on different time zones. Central Time people, I think we always do that.
Oh,
sorry about that. I could still go for a while if you want to continue or embellish on any details.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, why don't we take this quick moment, just to talk about, talk about all the time that it took to make this fan fiction, which sounds like you've had a little bit of help. This section has been more driven by your brother, so your older brother, he is. I know you guys have said he's inspired you. He always has challenged you, but he wrote about a good amount of this fanfic that we're talking about right now. Yeah, that's really.
He's got a mind.
I think it's cool that you guys do a lot of these things as brothers.
Well, our oldest brother, I've once said that to a friend. Well, I actually went on a date last week, and what I told the person I went out with was that in a lot of ways, Daniel and our oldest brother are more brilliant than I am. And what I had said was, think of me as kind of Sherlock or something, or Watson and Daniel being the other one, but our oldest brother is really Mycroft. And even Dan sometimes is like Mycroft to me. So the thing is, our oldest brother is the Mycroft in this family. There was a time he's still way more brilliant in a lot of ways, even with plotting, story, character, and whatnot, than we are. But the thing is, I don't know what happened, but in his 30s, he just lost, even in his, I think, late 20s, he lost a little confidence and drive for actually committing to paper everything. So what he began doing was just an oral fanfic with us, but what he also began doing is playing more video games. And at this point, he goes to his job, comes home, does video games. But you see, when he says, I had an idea for a fantasy story, he'll then come up with this entire, almost Tolkienian level, depth to it. Like, he'll come up with some linguistic terms, sometimes on the spot. It's pretty impressive to see. He'll come up with the map. He's actually had a map made for one world he's made for D&D. He'll come up with races.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Sometimes he comes up with this stuff on the spot. And he'll come up with countries, orders of chivalry, everything. Society, down to a sociological and even individualistic level. And even different fauna and flora. But the problem is, he just will not write a novel. It's just, he'll start talking about it, but then he'll kind of then say, now, I challenge you, make me 3 characters for this story, for this world, for this story, and we then have to, hop to it and do it. But when we say, well, will you be committing it to paper? Nah, I don't think I will. And he'll just go to put on a video game. Or it might be a sci-fi universe, or it might be, didn't he come up with a Victorian murder mystery horror thing once?
I think so.
Yeah, I know he did a murder mystery in the Victorian period, but he also did some horror at one point. Whatever he's been watching, reading, or playing will influence what he wants to put together, and then he'll just say, no, I'm not going to really do anything with this. So he could very well be another Homer, I think, but there's drive. He just doesn't care for it. And so he instead prefers to delegate the task of actually creating a novel and putting one together to us. And it's sad, really, because he's utterly brilliant.
It looks like you guys have your assignment, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
part of the Kenobi timeline was that he wanted us to write it down, but eventually as I developed more, and Dan and I developed more our fantasy universe, we don't have the time in life anymore. And so these podcasts are perfect for us because they allow us to convey his story that he crafted in the same way he conveyed it to us, orally. So it's kind of fitting.
That's brilliant. I'm really glad you shared that. It's interesting. You guys have, brothers sometimes have different talents, and sometimes you see things in your brother that you're like, if I had that ability, I'd be doing this. I see that with my brothers with all kinds of things. And I'm sure they think the same thing about me in some ways.
Yeah. Our oldest brother, though, when people meet him, they look on him, think Star Wars Revan. He's charismatic. No, he's utterly charismatic. He's well-spoken. The dude knows how to give a speech, so he's a good orator. He's utterly clever and very cultivated. But he's opinionated. He's hard-headed, hot-tempered. But ultimately, when people
It's a lot like Revan.
Yeah, when people meet me, though, it's kind of like meeting Jar Jar. They don't like me, normally. So,
come on.
Well, it's just what I've noticed, especially with employers. I often I'm overly submissive and meek with them, and not all of them like that or respect that.
It's like a reverse Midas touch.
Yeah, I have a reverse Midas touch with people. I have an anti-charisma. I put no points in it for some reason. But our oldest brother's just utterly charismatic. I've seen him talk to even, talk to people who hated me, and it's like he charms them instantly. So the thing is, I truly wish I had his charisma. But there are also times I wish I had his level of creativity. But the thing is, with his creativity came something, I think like a defeatist attitude or something, that he just doesn't see the point of committing to paper. The world has lost many a great epics because Chris would not pen it down and connect it to paper.
Yeah.
And whenever we say, all right, we'll commit what you've just said, if we were to tape record it and then commit it to paper, he'd be enraged. And, right, Dan, he'd probably, I don't know what he'd do.
Because on one hand, he might be fine with it. On the other hand, he might be upset. But
it'd probably be something that we'd have to ask him.
Mm-hmm. Which it's unfortunate that he lost his confidence in that department.
Yeah, he's, well, like I said, I have a lot of admiration and love for him because of, well, yeah. And just also on a note is that there's a lot of lore he's invented even for existing worlds, Zelda, Star Wars, and whatnot. And the way he can improve them, it's like, this guy should have been in charge of these studios and whatnot.
Yeah.
But instead, prefers regular jobs from PSW work to gas station to management in small companies and whatnot. And it's in my opinion, a waste of his talent. But like I said, I greatly admire him.
Yeah.
But as to...
Last question for you real quick, is how do you guys, I mean, you do so much writing on a day-to-day basis. Like, how do you guys have the energy? Like,
that's a good question. Sometimes I don't know. Like this past week, I've been too depressed to write for 2-3 days. All I've written are essays. But when it comes to writing stories and essays can take, when we're distracting ourselves between that and actually writing our novels and short stories and whatnot, will probably take like 3 hours per essay, thereabouts. But that's when I'm going really slow, which I usually do because I like to dance between the essay and the actual story. But when I was on my last teaching contract, I would go, well, in the morning, I'd wake up at 3:30, right, Dan? 3:15, 3:30, get to writing. There'd be one essay done, and there'd be at least a bit of a story, like probably at least a page or two. And then I'd be off to school. I'd write a page in a notebook at school between my classes, close, put it away, and set to work. And then I'd come home, write another essay, unless it was one of Dan's days, at which point I don't have to, and I immediately set to work writing another page. Or it's like if Dan's got the contract, or if we're both working, But the thing is, typically we sometimes even work on different schedules. So, but as far as drive goes, it's, I don't know, I get up in the morning and I just want to write, and I set to work writing. But between Daniel and Daniel, I think sometimes has the worst temper on some days, and I have the manic Sherlockian depression side. So it's a good thing I don't do drugs or alcohol, otherwise I'd end up like Shirley. I nicknamed him Shirley just because. That's what Mycroft calls him. I'd probably end up like him and saying I need work and just utterly depressed and whatnot. There are days I spend like Sherlock. I just don't do anything and I just sit there. But then there's days when I'll be writing faster than anyone and writing more pages than anyone. But I have a temperament like Sherlock, and we tried medicating it. It just didn't work out very well. I didn't react well to the medication. For some reason, it worked. Like, it was supposed to be an antidepressant, but it worsened my depression for some reason.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
Definitely can happen. I know some people. Well, I know someone very close to me that has not really found a drug to really help, but it's just it takes a long time.
And in my case, it also gave me headaches for some reason. So
the side effects are the big key. It's like the side effects can't be worse than the condition.
Yeah,
and sometimes some people are the opposite. It's like sometimes instead of a depressant, they need a stimulant.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, in my case, I'm usually the one who's more driven to write. And Dan will sometimes go like a day not doing any writing. Then another day, Daniel will write like 16 hours of his day almost.
Wow.
So we almost work on different shifts, and we just it's something where usually I have more energy for it.
Mm-hmm. And for example, if I'm not feeling the creative bug, if like I'm having a hard time figuring out what to write next for the story, I'll just write stuff like describing a battle scene or whatnot.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with...
or what you'll do is you'll tell me I need a scene, and I'll write you up a quick scene, and then I'll forward it to you.
Yeah, a quick prompt, and that sometimes helps.
Yeah, sometimes. Usually does.
And whatever your brain is capable of doing at that moment, just do that. Don't try to trudge forward on the thing that it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, and the thing is, we use different techniques to force ourselves forward and whatnot. And so that's for energy. I work better in the morning, so it's like 3 a.m. I'm writing.
Yeah, and that's extreme.
Yeah, but it makes me happy. And but I'm in bed at 7:30 or 8:30.
Yeah, there you go.
But Daniel will, when on a writing binge, will write till 1 a.m, and then we'll hurry off to bed, and and then 2 hours later I'm getting up. So we generally work on different shifts. He has more energy in the afternoon, or in the evening, I should say. I have more energy in the morning.
Okay. Well, that definitely makes sense. I mean, it's funny that you guys have that like shift.
Yeah.
That's cool though.
Daniel, like our eldest brother Chris, is a nighthawk. Most people in our family are. I'm an early bird. I think I'm the weird one.
Yeah, and in a way, there are reasons for that. Our older brother works graveyards, so he's had to adapt to becoming a nighthawk.
Although Chris, I've seen him go through a shift, and then just like be chipper and wanting to chat me up when I'm there, and he'll chat with me for like 3-4 hours, and then he'll just say, "All right, now I'm tired. You do whatever it is you want to do. I don't care. I'm going to sleep." And proceeds to promptly go into his room, close the door, go to sleep, and he would have been up for like 30 hours with no sleep. And it's like, holy crap, how does he have that kind of energy? So, like Daniel said, had he retained the confidence and the drive, he'd have written like 30 different books, mega epics by now. But such is life. C'est la vie. But as for...
Well, one plug here, just to mention, is that if you're someone that, has to be productive all the time, even when you don't want to, we have a great... Yeah, like me. I don't have quite the discipline of these guys. I wish I had the energy, but something that does give me a boost is I use Magic Mind, which is just a little productivity shot. that you can have daily. It's got one, and what I want to highlight is that it has a lot of really good natural ingredients and supplements. So things that writers and creatives need, like stuff for cognition, like lion's mane mushroom, chlorophyll for energy. It does have some matcha. It's got some B vitamins. And then for like not increasing your stress level, which can happen when you have too much caffeine, it has L-theanine, turmeric, vitamin C, ashwagandha. So I use it daily, and I think it's just like for me, I use it in that afternoon lull. So like around like 2 or 3 p.m. is my least creative, least mental, least cognitive time of day. And so as I'm transitioning to like 4 or 5, when my brain can start to reactivate, it like kicks in for me. So if you want to get your hands on something like this, we have an awesome promotion going on right now. It's 40% off of a subscription, but you got to use our code SWLC40, and you got to go to this link to use that code, magicmind.com/SWLC40. So yeah, 40% off, not a bad deal. And it's only available for the first 10 orders. So if you do want it, you should go out and act quickly. So yeah, just wanted to mention that before we kind of dive back in.
Sure. All right. So Luke and Han are staring up into the sky. There's no double sun though. And they're wishing they had magic mind. And the thing is, Lorian will end up training for the next while with Ferris because we need to write him out of the story for a bit. Because honestly, we're tired of seeing his face. I'm joking. Actually, it's just, this was our oldest brother kind of shunting him off the stage so that, things go back to being about Han and Luke, not him. As for Qui-Gon, who's right now much more important than Lorian, Qui-Gon is kind of turning away from the Force and the lightsaber because what Force techniques he is using is more to cloak himself, cloak his thoughts, cloak everything, and deliberately avoid detection. With that said, he would also try to, while dissimulating himself, replicate kind of what Palpatine had done when he in episode 1, 2, and 3. And our oldest brother was thinking, because he had trained for a time under Mace, who could do some of this with his Shatterpoint and his Vapod, because Qui-Gon understood the basics, or at least a bit of Vapod, he could kind of do this. So that ultimately, as he's working in the Empire and trying to get close to the center of power, he catches the attention of Palpatine, mostly due to the name, Dooku. And the name he'd take up, our oldest brother came up with it, because it sounded fancy schmancy and whatnot, Alderacius Dooku. And as Alderacius Dooku, Qui-Gon Kenobi would capture the attention of Palpatine, whom would be tickled at the thought of, a great nephew of Dooku, the great Count from episode 2. Honestly, that guy working for me. The heir of old Dooku. Yeah, I'm going to hire him and promote him because why the hell not? But this is where Alderacius Dooku would be given the governorship of Kalevala and the Mandalore space sector more as a test. Should he fail, he will die. Because Mandalorians. If he succeeds in pacifying the space sector, everything will go well. Now, little does he know that Qui-Gon actually has some Mandalorian connections through his mom. Well, he's half Mandalorian. So, and he does have some friends in the Salazzar family, and he would have forged a friendship with a young Mandalorian who was a tech specialist and a technical genius. And it would be through this link that Qui-Gon would decide, rather than trying to repress and get rid of the Mandalorians, unite them, but under his guidance and as a force against the Empire. But the thing is, Qui-Gon would kind of, with his Mandalorian friend, guarantee him the rank of Mandalore. And this is where we diverge from the main timeline, where for some reason Boba Fett became Mandalore, but never really used the title too often. Like, he doesn't seem to have cared too much to actually redub himself Mandalore. And so our oldest brother kind of thought there shouldn't be that divorce between Boba and the rank of Mandalore. So if he's not going to fully marry himself into the role, why not create a character who does? And the Mandalore he came up with was a distant cousin of Qui-Gon and Lorian's through their mother. And he was of the clan Ordo, because our brother really liked Canderous. And the idea was that this young Mandalorian, who has probably 10 years on Qui-Gon, he kind of regards himself as almost a senior partner in this friendship. But the two were friends when Qui-Gon was traversing the galaxy. They had run into each other, they had saved each other's lives. So this is a long-standing friendship, but Qui-Gon would ultimately decide to wed it to his political career. And through this and a patronizing of a certain clone called Crusher, who is clone unit ARC 1138, because our brother always felt, since 1138 keeps coming up, thanks to Lucas, make him a badass clone, which Crusher goes back to being... Crusher is one of the clones we introduced in our Clone Wars episodes. So, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, people. Check those episodes out. But ultimately, what Qui-Gon is doing is accruing a bit of an inner circle as he becomes a governor. But then, this is where our oldest brother had one mentality, because he was very well read in Japanese Sengoku Jidai history and other periods of history like that, such as the Three Kingdoms period of Chinese history. And his mentality was that if the Imperial Senate has been dissolved and Vader is focused on Luke, who's keeping an eye on the Imperial governors? No one. So, and since Palpatine is clearly out to lunch, Qui-Gon takes over another space sector, using the Mandalorians and the clones he does have. So he gobbles another space sector, then another. And before you know it, there's an increase in territory. He's thinking like a feudal lord. But he also forms alliances. Now, we were thinking, for one thing, there would have been... Qui-Gon would also have the support of at least... he'd basically end up requesting support in the harem of Palpatine, because Palpatine did have one. And harems are always centers of power. So, Qui-Gon would basically want some legitimacy for Palpatine, but also for his bedmates. And this allows him to kind of navigate Imperial politics so that no one will pay him any mind while he expands his territory and builds a new fount of power against Palpatine and Vader. Now, we're not saying he's going to succeed, so bear that in mind. He forms an alliance with let me think. I think he was... the character of Vlan was... Governor Vlan was one we created. Was he Corellian? I think he was.
Yeah.
Basically, the idea is he forms an alliance with a corporate guy, helps him be nominated governor, and... No, wait, he was Onderonian. That's right, because he helps this guy claim the position of governor of Onderon. But this guy is actually an Onderonian nationalist of sorts. That's right, because Vlan was actually an Onderonian with deep loyalties to the Onderonian royal family. And Qui-Gon helps him get his job, because the guy is also is a corporate guy at first, but Qui-Gon helps get him appointed. And this guy in turn has a bit of gratitude and starts to expand his territory. And there's also the Now, this is where our oldest brother had the idea of a female governor. I helped craft this character, Neva Crowan, who would basically prove she'd be dubbed the Iron Lady of Junction 5. Because she's basically like one of those Elizabeth I types. You know, someone who's ice cold to the outside world and whatnot. And, you know, has a tight-fisted view of control and power. But Neva she would claim her position through an appointment thanks to one of the harem girls. Now, the idea with her was she was the Corellian. That's right, she was from Corellia. But her best friend was a Corellian noble girl who got put into Palpatine's harem. But Neva was her friend and attendant because she climbed up from the streets to that position, but then got appointed to Junction 5 as an imperial governor. But she ends up proving very ruthless and even cruel to her enemies, and decides that she shouldn't just have Junction 5. She decides to expand to the rest of the Spaceport 88 Alliance, which actually is, you know, like worth like 20 to 30% of all intergalactic trade. So she becomes governor of this very powerful Spaceport Alliance in the Midrim. And phone troubles. And so you have these 3 regional governors that start to expand. Now, this is where there is some Roman history influence. Our brother Chris had the mentality as a nod to the Roman Civil War period that these 3 eventually start to run into conflict with each other. And many governors try to play them against each other. It fails. And Mandalore, I think he decided it'd be ironic if Mandalore and some Jedi who had infiltrated Neva's court, because the thing with Neva's court is that Neva's friend gives birth to a daughter to Palpatine, and Neva takes this girl in because the mother dies in childbirth. So Neva's claiming she has a potential heiress to the Imperial throne. And no, she's not named Rey. It was named Ishara, after a goddess of Mesopotamian mythology. But Mandalore and some of the Jedi that had slipped into, had begun to infiltrate, per Qui-Gon's encouragement and plans, are the protectors of Ishara. But they and Mandalore exert some influence, so that the 3 basically meet on Onderon, and rather than the 3 entering into a battle, they form a triumvirate. And they assign to themselves new titles: High Governors and Triumvirs. So they all go back to their individual territories and begin working their military fleets in concert with each other and expanding their powers and their influence throughout the galaxy. And then they start appointing and removing governors from office as they see fit. Because as they see it, this is our show. This is our galaxy. They've chopped it up between them. Now, this is while Vader's on the hunt for Luke. And Vader's not really paying attention to the rest of the galaxy, as we all know. He's focused on Luke. Palpatine is just an absentee ruler. Most of the Grand Admirals, and this is where Dan and I will take some heat, are not actually competent military officers. They got their positions because Palpatine likes them. Like, if they could have toppled Luke, Leia, the Republic, they would have. But I view it as they didn't. Oh no, well, they all fell into infighting. Not all of them. But the problem is, we need to think of them as the ultimate fighting force, but we don't actually see any evidence of it. And some of them probably were competent military officers. But I never subscribed to the theory, and neither did our oldest brother, that they were all that brilliant. Because if they were that brilliant, they would have done it. So this is where...
and they had the means. Like, they had more troops, they had better equipment, they had everything at their disposal. So why couldn't they do it?
Yeah, and his idea was Neva ends up capturing one of them and basically appointing him as one of her admirals, or Grand Admiral. Vlan would kill one later on, and then there'd be a replacement one, because our oldest brother says there could be earlier ones, but the final ones that are listed in all the guides have to be the final ones. And their fates have to be the same, for the most part. They have to follow a similar path. They don't always have to be the same, but because he did have some different ideas on how some of them would end. But he's like, at the time of Episode 6, the same Grand Admirals have to be Grand Admirals. The 13 have to be the ones in position. So he's like, there are going to be earlier ones, and then there's going to be those ones. That was kind of his thinking. But ultimately, though, these triumvirs will end up very powerful, very influential. But there's some problems. They are not able to truly fight the Sith. They're not Jedi. Mandalorians can do pretty good, but even Mandalorians have their limits. They can't be everywhere at once. So what ends up happening is that Vader, of course, initially doesn't mind these governors. He actually thinks they're useful for helping him reunite the galaxy, because Palpatine broke centralized government. So our oldest brother also had the idea that the reason they're so successful is because Vader decides, well, I'm focused on Luke, I need people to start uniting the galaxy. You have my blessings. So they're relying on Vader's seal of approval for expanding their territories. But the trouble is that Vader, here's the thing, he never really liked Alderacius Dooku. There was something about him that just, it wiggled at him. Like, he just doesn't know, but he doesn't like him. Because deep down, there's a side of Vader that always suspected him. And that was the idea. And what ends up happening is that a Sith plot takes place. Because there's a Sith Lord called Darth Trayaus, who's, I believe we've spoken before, but Darth Trayaus is a male counterpart name that's, I think, used at some point in the canon. No, it's Trayaus Academy, that's right. And Trayaus would be used as a male variant to Traya. So this Dark Lord of Betrayal he always knew who Qui-Gon was, would basically end up keeping track of Qui-Gon's movements in the galaxy. Because when Qui-Gon wanted to go help out Luke or visit his brother, he'd always go in secret, then come back and take up the role of Alderacius Dooku again. What he didn't know is every once in a while, Trayaus would slip in as a mechanic or as, just a regular security guy on this planet or that one, or even, eventually crack Qui-Gon's security codes. And the thing is, Trayaus kept track of everything. And cooperating with other Sith Lords, he would basically actually convey the truth and convey all the files via one of Vader's bounty hunters to Vader. So that shortly after Episode 5, Qui-Gon's secret is outed. And Vader, who realizes he's been betrayed and the entire Empire has been played for a fool, rushes in. And the thing is, Qui-Gon had assigned Mandalore to another space sector to, quell... Well, he was having some territorial conflict with one guy, sends out Mandalore. He goes to deal with a negotiation between two different governors on a different part of his borders. Vader smashes his way through some of the fleets, and Qui-Gon is forced to retreat and flee. But before he can properly rally some of his legions, Vader punches through, because he's Darth Vader. And a lot of the Imperial governors then betray Qui-Gon, because, this is too good to be true. And the other two triumvirs, fearful of going down of falling, though they have a personal attachment to Qui-Gon, they decide to basically just abandon him. Mandalore has orders not to come back for Qui-Gon, but Qui-Gon will have been nearly captured. But Mandalore would ultimately team up with a Jedi by the name of Bowen. Yes, who's inspired by Bowen from Dragonheart. But him and this Jedi would rush to the rescue. Well, Bowen is a hermit who's a young Jedi Knight. Just probably a year younger than Luke. And the two would basically rescue Qui-Gon, get him out of there, and Qui-Gon would then decide to go off on his own. And the thing is, Vader would order the pursuit of Qui-Gon Kenobi, even as Qui-Gon's personal favorites disperse and flee into the shadows. Many of them running to the rebellion. Now, Moff Ma didn't know this and was not actively working with Qui-Gon, but a lot of this faction that Qui-Gon had built up would end up joining the rebellion at Mon Calamari and whatnot, and other places like that. So that this was also our oldest brother's explanation for how the rebellion went from being annihilated after Yavin to actually having a chance to fight at Endor. Because he always found there was a disparity, like, how the hell could the rebellion even build anything when it was destroyed after Yavin? Like, it was just a few fragment things, and then you have Hoth, where they're just smashed to hell. So his explanation was Qui-Gon plays a pivotal role, but his own attempt at a secret rebellion fails. And, what he built up ends up going to Moff Ma and Leia. While Qui-Gon flees into the shadows, broken and defeated and crushed at his failures. But it's at this time that this Jedi Knight Bowen that he had met previously in passing, but who never really wanted to come back to being a Jedi, would end up forced into the role of training Qui-Gon as his Jedi Master to an extent, as Qui-Gon needs to go back to being a Jedi. And realizing that going it the Palpatine route didn't work, Qui-Gon would ultimately be also persuaded by the spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn to reconnect with the teachings that Mace had passed on to him. And just telling him, you need to go back to the beginning. You need to go back to Mace and what he taught you. Now, if people are wondering, meanwhile, what about Viera, because we've kind of dropped her last time. She was thirsty for blood and vengeance, and just wanted to kill Luke and Han and the rebellion because she lost her uncles.
All that glorious, wonderful stuff.
But the thing is, on one of Qui-Gon's trips, right before Episode 5, she would be in hot pursuit of him because she would have been tipped off by Treyas. This would have been one of Treyas' first attempts to kind of get rid of Qui-Gon, or at least test him. Qui-Gon, though, would kind of outfox her in a dogfight and shoot her down, and she'd end up crash landing on a planet where there are plants that are man-eaters, and with various sarlaccs on it and whatnot. And you know, like the old fantasy thing of plants that devour people, right? Our brother was hyped up on that stuff, so thought, let's throw her onto that. But on the same token, the idea is that there was a ancient Sith spirit there who wished for redemption and to train one last apprentice, so that he could atone for his sins as a Sith Lord and go back and cross over as a Jedi Knight. And seeing the potential in Viera, his spirit would save her. And so she's stuck on that planet. She'd at first refused to be trained because she doesn't care for this Jedi stuff. She just wants vengeance. But after nearly dying to some of these planets, she'd kind of bond with this ghost. And what would happen is that she's trapped there for about a year in the lead up to pretty much. She lands, I think, 7 months before episode 5. So there's 5 months after episode 5 that, that's when she pops back up for the first time in a while. So she's kind of set aside for a bit. And it's just, our oldest brother had the mentality, not everyone has to be, not everyone's going to always be active. Running, and fighting and having all this blaze of glory stuff. The fact is, some characters will run into a wall, will sit down, while others keep on running. You know what I mean? Not everyone has to always be doing stuff. And
no. It's kind of exhausting.
Yeah. So his idea was Viera and Lorian are benched. Viera's been a great bounty hunter character and a great antagonist. But this is when he decides she must transition from antagonist to protagonist. And it's through a former Sith ghost who wishes to atone. He's like a Junta Paul. And he's like, I wish to atone, but I must pass down what I know, what Force techniques I know, to an apprentice. I need to redeem someone and teach them. And Vera is that person. In time, she'll be guided off the planet and over to some Jedi cults. And the thing is, the idea was that there were various Jedi cults that had, that survived, but there was also Sith cults. And the thing is, as for Rock and Ron, those two who had been spending time training under Jilia would end up eventually undertaking a mission that would result in them crossing paths with Darial Farron, the master of their mother, and they would encourage him to go back out there and pick up his lightsaber and help everyone out, just as Ferris had. So they form a bit of a four-man team of Jedi. But the trouble is, once again, Darth Withern, the gluttonous Sith with the blood gem necklace, would end up killing Darial Farron. And Jilia, No, he doesn't kill Darial. That's right. Darial dies much later. Whoops. Because I don't really have too many notes on Darial. It's Jilia who dies, and Ron is captured by Withern and his Sith cult, which actually have as their base Korriban, because it has to be on Korriban, because Korriban's cool. And Rock would feel terrible and angry and wanting to rescue his brother, and would fall under the influence of Skyron Vigil, who was one of those contacts of Qui-Gon's. But when Qui-Gon, when things go wrong for Qui-Gon, Skyron decides, yeah, okay, I may not be fully discovered yet, but it's only a matter of time. I'm absconding, and, he kind of tells the rebellion, I've been a good contact for you, but I'm leaving my post, because it's only a matter of time. And he goes off, becomes Rock's master, and in the meantime, Withern over on Korriban decides, I'm going to train, I'm going to try to corrupt Ron and use him to lure over Rock, because his goal is not to absorb one twin. He wants to absorb both of them and their twin bond, believing this will give him enormous amounts of power. And he's right. And that this will elevate him above Vader. It's quite possible. But ultimately, the Jedi a group of Jedi, those who are loyal to Ferris, along with Ferris Olin himself, mount a rescue operation and fight against Withern's many thousand of Sith. Yes, he will have thousands of Sith. It was several thousands of Sith, almost 10,000. And the thing is, Rock and what was your hamster again?
Oh, right, Mex.
Mex and Vlanton and, of course, Rock slip in and would break the chains that Ron holds, and there in the Sith Temple, Ron would basically engage Withern in battle. Except this time, he'd use what dark side techniques he learned, except for the light side. He does know lightning, though. Bear in mind, you cannot use lightning and be of the light side. So Ron basically uses every trick in the book because he was taught the Sith forms of his lightsaber style. Now, there are 7 Jedi forms of lightsaber combat, but it was our oldest brother's mentality that there must be Sith versions, because the lightsaber style of Palpatine is often called Ataru, Form 4, but it doesn't bear any resemblance to the Form 4 of Yoda or Luke. So our oldest brother theorized it's the Sith Form 4. And this is where the idea was. Oberon is a Form 3 user. He uses a combination of Soresu, the defensive style of Obi-Wan, with Shicho. So he prefers very simple techniques to basically tire his enemy out. But he now knows the more aggressive Sith version. So he uses what he knows and engages with her in a heavy-duty battle, which sees them basically fight from throne room to hangar to upper part of the temple, down a steep cliff, through the air, and then once they land, to the death, with Withern ultimately slain in combat. One of his apprentices, of course, seizes the blood gem because he's greedy for it, and races off into the desert. For Ron and Rock, the twins are reunited. Everybody's happy. There's almost a dance. No, there's no dancing. But Ferris and Skyrim knight Oberon as a knight. Now, as for Rock, he's feeling a little insecure because, he's kind of being left behind. And this will start to feed into a bit of his temper. And Rock is the hot-headed Edward Elric one. So he's much more susceptible to the dark side, I think.
That was the idea.
Yeah. And, of course, these Jedi then disperse. But Rock and Ron will end up fighting in the ensuing conflict in that part of the galaxy, because Withern had united a great many Sith cults and Sith factions and those who were not happy with Vader and Palpatine. With his death, his dream of building a Sith empire dies. You have all these fragmented Sith cults, but you also have some Jedi cults. And our oldest brother called what ensues is as a mini conflict within the galactic civil conflict, the Cult Wars. And the thing is, Rock and Ron will engage in it, and Rock will ultimately come to trust a man by the name of Ordnum, which I think everyone's going to recognize that name. Anyone who's been listening to this podcast will know him as one of the guys who turned to the dark side, and who was a vaunted enemy a sworn enemy of Malira. But he's pretending to be a heroic, chill guy, even as he disguises the fact that he's called Darth Tyrannon. But him and Rock kind of strike up a friendship, and he begins to kind of start to lure Rock over in a similar thing akin to Exar Kun and Ulic Queldroma. But the difference is Rock is not going to end up killing his brother. That's not going to happen. The great thing of Rock is that he's not like Ulic. He doesn't have a Sith poison in his veins, and he's not going to cock it up. But there's also another figure who ends up joining this Cult Wars, and that's Val. Valerian would end up. It's Valerius, I think. Well, Val ends up joining his sons in this Cult Wars. And the thing is, Rock still has anger towards him for what he felt was an abandonment of them as children, while Ron is much more forgiving of his father and longs for a bond with him. So you've got this going on between them. Now, neither of the brothers are able to end these Cult Wars. This is not their destiny. their destiny was to stop Withern and later Tyrannon. But it's into these cult wars that Viera steps forward. And also, now she is entrusted by her Ghost Master, I don't know what else to call him, to seek out the heads of every cult, Jedi cult she can, and humble herself before them. Not an easy thing to do for someone as arrogant as her. And to apprentice herself to them and learn their individual Force techniques. This involves studying under the Day Sisters, the Baron Doe, various Jedi cults, and basically learning what she can and engaging in the Force as much as possible. And building herself a lightsaber. And, of course, she would end up also studying under one Jedi who is a certain Togorian who actually turned to the dark side after, well, right before Order 66. And he is pretending to be a Jedi Master and a seer, and he starts to teach Viera purely Jedi techniques, because he's not wanting to teach her anything of the dark side. But he wants to use her, because he recognizes she has her mother's pendant. And that pendant is what he's been after for many years, after her death. Because it wasn't until after her mother died that he realized that pendant is actually a map to the Valley of the Sith. And he wishes to activate it, but he's not sure how. And so we have these cult wars with Qui-Gon off to one side with another Jedi. We've got the Stardust twins wrestling with their daddy issues. Dan's smirking.
Yes.
And you've got Viera having to try to let go of her rage about and grief for the loss of her uncles, and trying to reconcile herself from clone, in a way, culturally, and kind of ethnically, to Jedi. Because this is a vast 180 for her. And in a way, her brain is still racing to catch up. And all this is happening in the background in the immediate aftermath of Episode 5. Really. And so we've got some of the post-Episode 5 stuff. And I think this is a good time to end it.
All right. A good chunk there today.
Thanks.
I mean, all these, you're integrating major Star Wars characters, I think, authentically, giving them space to breathe, but making, like, these other parts more interesting with these side characters. Like, give people, like, more people
to cheer for.
To, like, yeah, exactly. More people to cheer for. Like, they're integrated into the story.
And the thing is, there was one thing I had skipped over. Viera, as a bounty hunter, had one encounter with Luke. And she had let him go. Because as much as she was burning for revenge for her uncles, she still remembered that farm boy she met years ago. And Luke had a shot at probably killing her, but refused because, he's like, I can't kill her.
He's Luke.
Yeah. But this would have stayed on her mind as she was a bounty hunter. And so her ghost master would remind her constantly, he spared you for a reason, and you spared him for a reason. And she cannot bring herself to understand why this was. He did murder her uncles in her eyes. But this is where she would have to learn to depersonalize what happened. And her ghost master would teach her it was war. Luke didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
If Luke could have spared all those clones, he probably would have. But you got to let go of that. You're disgracing their memories by holding on to hatred against him. Because they didn't hate him. And, she has to... This is part of her Jedi path of forgiveness. So that ultimately it's about Luke as well there. Like, it's Luke who helps redeem her. That was always the idea with her. Because everything has to be about... Luke's kind of at the center of everything. So I forgot to mention that earlier. and the rush to convey all this before 7. So there it is.
Yeah. It's really frustrating. It makes it almost probably even more frustrating and doubles the amount of anger when you're trying to be hateful towards Luke, because he doesn't give you a lot of reasons once you actually meet him and see who he is. And it's like, oh, there's nothing about him that I can like hate.
And the idea was with Luke is that, he would take the attitude, I'm sorry for that you lost family. I had to do it, but I'm sorry. Like, honestly, he's like, I never thought of the clones as having family. Oh my gosh, That's terrible. Oh, I'm so sorry. If I could, I'd atone for it. But all I can do is keep on fighting and try to make sure there's sacrifices, and how Vader traumatized them with Order 66 and Operation Nightfall doesn't go to waste. Like, we have to make sure that what they suffered through never happens again. The problem with that is, how is someone on the opposite side supposed to hate him? Like you said, it's like, he's kind. That's ultimately the virtue Luke embodies. He's a very messianic character. And he's not supposed to be the strongest Jedi out there in the galaxy. But what he is supposed to have the most powerful presence, the most powerful love of all the Jedi. Because,
he's not the most powerful, but he is the best.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
There's a difference between being the strongest Jedi and the greatest Jedi.
Yeah.
And Luke is the greatest.
Really true.
Because no one believes in forgiveness and can actually get people to redeem themselves from the dark side, quite like Luke does.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot about Luke, for sure. Yeah, well, thanks again, guys. I know it was a little bit of a shorter time and you had to constrict the story down, but you did a good job, I feel. It didn't seem rushed, but you did a good job.
Thanks. Next time we'll hopefully cross into episode 6, which will happen mostly like what...
That'll be fun. Yeah, that'll be exciting. But before we close out, just don't forget to check out the Brothers Krynn Substack, which I will be plugging on Substack. If you're not listening to us on Substack or checking us out there, you definitely should, because that's where all the fun and all the comments and really a lot of discussion is happening. And if you make a comment there, one of us is definitely going to see it and probably interact. So definitely come on over there. The Brothers Krynn is creating also on their own channel lots of different fantasy stories, essays, and fan fiction, not just about Star Wars, but anime, Lord of the Rings, fantasy, all kinds of different stuff, right, guys?
Just too many to keep track of.
There's a lot to keep track of because they're pumping out stuff. You'll never run out of something to read, which is great, but it's all high quality. But another thing that's high quality is also the Magic Mind subscription, which I encourage you guys to go get with our link. It's at www.magicmind.com/SWLC40 and use SWLC40 at checkout to get that discount. And without further ado, please give us both of our podcasts a review on Spotify preferably, or iTunes. We'd love it if you guys could review and give us a 5-star rating, or just share your honest feedback. But other than that, thank you all for tuning in, and we will be back soon with another episode of the Kenobi Timeline, and I wish the Force be with you all.
And may the Schwartz be with you all as well.
Bye now.